Let's get into our lesson. Go with me to Genesis chapter number, and we're looking week 2 at critical moments. And this is dealing with key moments where decisions were made that had huge implication or impact on what took place after that. Last week we looked at Adam and Eve. Doesn't get bigger than that, does it? Adam and Eve were in a perfect environment. And yet a perfect environment did not lead to a perfect choice. That was our big takeaway, is that no matter how good the setting is, you still have to make a right choice, and ease of comfort or convenience does not make for a right choice in and of itself. So today we're looking at the story of Lot, with a title here in our lesson of a pitched tent. And he made a very big decision in his life that had devastating consequences on his family. And it didn't seem like all that much when it happened. For example, if you were reading Genesis chapter number 13, and this decision is made, if you did not know about Sodom and Gomorrah, you probably would walk away from that thinking, okay, well, no big deal. And I imagine it probably wouldn't wanted blasting out there. All right, look at me, verse number wanted blasting out there. All right, look at me, verse number 5 and 6. Let's talk about the conditions. So the conditions first. What environment was this decision made in? And we look in chapter 13, verse number 5 and 6. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. So Lot, of course, if you are familiar with the background of the story, Abraham is called by God into a land of promise, the land of Canaan. And God is blessing Abraham along the way. He is increasing him. And Lot had gone with him as Lot is Abraham's nephew, and so Abraham does not have any children of his own at this point. And so we would expect that Lot would actually be the child of inheritance if nothing changes. Now we know something does change, but Lot goes with him, and he leaves from Haran and follows there along. And the Bible here now brings us to chapter 13 and shows us that both of these men have experienced blessing to the point that they have too much stuff. Yeah, I think we can understand that, not in a negative way, but they just couldn't all fit in the same area. Anybody ever gone through that yard sale, house cleaning of the Lord has greatly blessed us, it's time to get rid of some of this stuff, right? And so for them, they didn't do a garage sale or a sheep sale. They went ahead and looked and examined and said that there's something had to be done. So notice here a couple of things about the conditions. Lot made a decision of faith to follow Abraham. So Lot was a righteous man. It's important to understand that. He is a righteous man. Now this is hard when you actually see the commentary on Lot to think of him as a righteous or a just man. But the Bible calls him the just man and a righteous soul. So it is indisputable that Lot was a man of righteousness, and a show of faith in the promise as well. I believe that Lot had a choice. He could have stayed there, but I believe that he went. Again, he's not a small child. This is a grown man. We understand that in our text. And I believe, again, a fairly young man, at least by way of chapter 13. But I believe that he made the decision in faith to go and follow with Abraham and ultimately to follow the Lord. And so notice, secondly, Lot was greatly blessed by God while he journeyed with Abram. So again, we're going to call Abraham Abram because at this point of our study here in this passage, he's still Abram. But by chapter 19, at the end, he's Abraham. So, we'll hear both this morning. But as we mentioned, God blessed Lot. So if Lot wasn't supposed to be there, well, certainly God had something different to say about it. God was blessing him. And we know that by Abraham, all nations would be blessed. Of course, the Messiah would come through the line of Abraham. So we see he's blessed. He's a man of faith. Then number 3, they faced a growing space constraint. So what happens is their herdsmen have some conflict. I imagine they're fighting over the same pasture area, and something had to give. So Abraham calls Lot and says, Lot, here's the problem we have. Look at all this land we got out here. We don't have to build right on top of each other here. We can spread it out a little bit. So you take the lot over. It's a lot joke, right? But you could take the area a little bit further out, right? And really, he told him, you can take whatever you want. Look to your left, look to your right. God has promised us this land, so pick what you want. I believe Abraham showed humility in this, and ultimately faith in that. He trusted that no matter what Lot picked, God was going to take care of him. And so they have space constraint. That was absolutely true as a condition leading to this decision. And then number 4, Abram proposed separation to avoid strife. I can jump 3 and 4 together. So that leads us then to a decision that Lot has to make. Right? Abraham's talking with him and saying, I think it's best that we spread out a little bit. And that leads to the statement here about the situation. Lot had to deal with a tough situation, but he had an obvious solution. Now that's what makes this particularly interesting to me this morning, is that there was a very obvious solution to the problem. Abraham says, pick out the land. Lot looks up, and what does he see? Well, he sees prime farming land. On the surface, it's kind of a no-duh, right? Hey, there's this land here, and this is going to be perfect. It's well-watered plains. I can't think of a better spot if we're going to tell me to pick whatever I want, this seems the obvious choice. And so there was an obvious problem, and then there was you ever made a practical choice that resulted in painful consequences? So practical decisions do not always make for right decisions. And that's the hard thing for us sometimes to understand. There are decisions that on paper might check all the boxes. I've got sheep, I'm in farming, I've got perfect farmland, my family wants me to spread out. Seems like this is checking all the boxes. And again, it would have made sense. But again, spiritual decisions go beyond just what makes sense practically. All the stars align, so to speak. We still have to examine whether a decision is right or wrong, the impact that such a decision would have. And I think that's what makes this decision such an interesting one to look at, is if we Sodom and Gomorrah, I would not bat an eye at this decision. I don't think you would either. You'd read it and we all go on like, okay, why is that in the Bible? I mean, do we read passages like that regularly, right? Where God tells us some event and we have to stop and think, okay, right? So there was something known about that city, about that area, was that the men there were very wicked. Do you think that Lot knew that? I'm inclined to think that he probably did. I'm inclined to think he probably did. I can't definitively prove to you that he knew exactly what Sodom and Gomorrah were before he went there, except for if the Bible is stating this, it seems to indicate maybe we might say as an asterisk of, here's Lot's decision, and oh, by the way, this is a key piece of information about what he is deciding to do. And so, but even then, Lot, don't miss this now, Lot did not choose to go to Sodom and Gomorrah. All right, he did not, his choice here says he went to dwell in the cities of the plain, but he was pitched toward that. Like he got up and he moved, and obviously there was some area between where Abraham and Lot were at and where Sodom and Gomorrah were at in these plains. And of course, there were some cities along the way of the plains leading up to Sodom and Gomorrah. But the Bible shows us initially that his decision was not immediately to go into Sodom and Gomorrah. That's not what the Bible states here in chapter number 13. Again, look, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain. And you say, well, then that means he was in Sodom. It's one of those cities. No, because look at the last statement. And what did he do? And pitched his tent toward Sodom. So, I mean, that was the direction he was facing. But even still, he was not in that city. So some could argue, well, he knew it was a wicked place. So he chose a middle ground position between where he was at with Abraham and where Sodom and Gomorrah was. So what was the challenges of this situation and of this choice that were made, what we might say the lead up? So the conditions were, here's what's going on. The challenges is, okay, here's what he was facing when he was making this choice. Okay, first, there was the pressure of strife. Okay, I want to ask you this question now. It's a question that is in our questions at the end, but I'm going to ask you now. Instead of pitching his tent facing Sodom, what should Lot have done? What do we think?
Pitched it toward Abram.
Pitched it toward Abram. Okay.
Defaulted to Abraham to make the choice since Abraham is the senior.
Okay. Some would argue that as well. I've heard both of those arguments made. Someone else? Anybody? I believe that this shows the difficulty of the situation, because the text tells us, again, Abraham is telling him, we got to do something. Abraham is the senior, so he listens to him in that, but might he have deferred back to Abraham to say, Abraham, I'm content to dwell with you. You decide what's best. And I'll trust that you're going to make the right decision in that. In my mind, that's a thought. But at the same time, if he were to say, well, I'm listening to what Abraham told me, but I really don't want to leave that far from Abraham, but I know we need some space. We need some breathing room. And it reminds me of when my in-laws moved to Kansas, and at first they were in our basement. And then, my father-in-law, Aaron, we're moving. Okay, well, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. We didn't think you were going to stay in the basement forever. We would have let my mother-in-law stay there forever, but we wouldn't have let my father-in-law stay there forever. He'd have been out back in a shed or something. And so they moved, but we were happy that they just moved, 5 minutes down the street, right? So that's what we were hoping. Not, hey, they came out here and then we're just gonna get as far away from you and we're going to be facing the opposite direction, and so I think there is an insinuation in this that Lot's turning now away from Abraham, and I believe, my thought is, the Bible doesn't tell us what Lot should have done, just what he shouldn't have done. Obviously, here in this, I believe he did have some choices. I believe he had choices. I think either one of those would have been a better choice than what he had done. And to say, okay, we're going to space out a little bit, but I know that there's wickedness that direction, so I don't want to keep moving myself that way, because that's gonna be a problem. I want to stay close by, but maybe we can have a little bit more yard. Maybe we can put a couple more steps here. Some argue that he shouldn't have left at all. I've heard that argument, that he goes back to Abraham like, hey, let's resolve it with our herdsmen, and I'll go talk to them, but I want to stay here with you. And the example of that would be Elijah and Elisha, where when he's getting ready to be called up, he tells Elisha, now stay back here, and Elisha's like, I'm paraphrasing, but no chance. It's not happening. I'm going with you. Wherever you go, I'm going. And multiple times, every city he went to, Elijah challenged him to do that. And Elisha just said, I'm staying with you. And you see, recognized the power of God and the presence of God was on the prophet of God, Elijah. So perhaps, and I think that would be a fair argument as well, that some make and say, he should have just been like, nope, I'll get rid of every sheep I have and stay here with you. And again, I'm really not advocating for any of those, other than to say that there were options, that some kind of decision had to be made. And I think we have to ask, if it wasn't pitching your tent towards Sodom, then what should it have been? And I think we had some good discussion points there with it. But there was the pressure of strife. So the situation had to be resolved. So, as we mentioned, some would argue that Lot was wrong for ever leaving Abram. The text shows us that there was a genuine issue that needed an answer, needed some type of response. The pressure of potential or ongoing strife can make for a foolish choice. All right, well, there's disagreement. We got to do something. Second, the freedom of choice. So talking about the challenges he faced, he's given an option. How many people, when presented with an option, pick the wrong option? And to that point, it would have been a lot easier if you didn't have to make the choice and would have just deferred it back. But at some point in everybody's life, there comes a point where maybe you have that mentality, and the answer is no, you make the choice. And so there is the freedom of choice. He was given the options. Like if I ask my kids, do you want to eat a salad, or do you want Kraft mac and cheese? What are they going to pick? They're going to pick the salad, of course. Never. They're going with the Kraft mac and cheese. I'm not even sure what's in that, but it's not good, I don't think. But probably gives you cancer or something. But so we understand. You give kids a choice. A lot of times, what choice do they make? They don't always make the right choice. But as they grow and mature, the expectation is what? That they make right choices. That they don't decide to eat a box of ice cream, the whole box. So, like 12 ice cream bars in there, because they realize that's not going to feel too good afterwards. All right. And so as a kid, though, they get into that stuff, and mischief is born in a child, is what the Bible says. But Lot is not a small child here. Maturity should have won out over this challenge. But there does come a point, we know this, and I think if we look at it from the standpoint of leaving home, kids leave home, and they're, for the first time, presented with the choice, and how often do they flop? And it's like, well, it was my first time making a choice, so I decided I was going to go get a roommate. And you see how those kind of decisions go. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And they don't always think through what that decision is going to lead to. So we see the freedom of a choice, and that was really the same even as last week, right? They had a choice. Here you go. Here's your choice. You say, wouldn't it have been easier if God just wouldn't have given a choice? But that's not how God works. And God allows us to make a choice and wants us to make the right choice. And then notice this one, the subtlety of change. Talk about challenges in this decision. Lot was not making a big move. Okay? He was not making a big move. While he did leave Abram, and it would be a change, he's still going to be in the area nearby. How do we know this? He moved to an area that he could see. Couldn't have been that far. Unless it's like Kansas, where you just look out and you're like, okay, yeah, I can see way over in Colorado, and I'll go over there. No, I think reasonably speaking, he did not go, days and days of journey away. Even still, I don't believe he was all that far. So he probably got one of those in-town U-Hauls to do the move. You know what I'm saying? He didn't even have to get the one way and drop it off in Sodom after it was done. All right, thank you for the light chuckle over here for the corny reference. At least somebody. But I think we understand. It was simple. It was a simple thing. It wasn't some big thing. But in his mind, the separation would be very small, and it would solve for a big problem. Doesn't that make sense? A small choice to fix a big problem? Except for the small choice ended up with an even bigger problem than what was expected. So there's a subtlety of change. He didn't see what was going to happen in this choice. And then we see the evil in the land. It's reasonable, again, to argue that there might not have been any good places. I hadn't presented this argument to this point, but the Bible tells us earlier in this chapter, verse number 7, if you flip back over to verse number 7, and let's see what it says there. And there was a strife between the herdmen and Abram's cattle, and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. Now, that's not a footnote without significance. These individuals that were in the land were doing great evil against the Lord. It was not just Sodom and Gomorrah. God was actually going to judge the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Because, and this is what God even told Abraham later on, was that there's going to be this time period they were going to go out of the land to allow time for God's judgment to come to full bloom on the inhabitants of the land of Canaan. Because God is merciful. And he was showing his mercy to those inhabitants. But I believe that in the surrounding area, there was a lot of wickedness. And that, of course, made probably his decision even a little bit more difficult. Because in his mind and reasoning, potentially, he might have said something like, well, no matter where I go, there's going to be some bad influence. Doesn't that sound like a lot of justification we use today? We do. We live in a wicked world. You don't have to look far to find wickedness in this world. I mean, it's everywhere. And so sometimes we will use that to justify a decision to say, well, this is the best of bad choices. Maybe in his mind, that's what he thought. Well, if I'm going to be in an area where there's the Canaanite, and the Perizzite, and the Sodomite, then I might as well pick the most beneficial spot for me. I think it maybe played a part in his thinking. And so I think that did add a level of difficulty to this choice, just because the land is evil. But I would remind you that we as believers are not stuck between bad choices. I don't believe that. We have the Holy Spirit of God. We've got the Word of God. And we can make a good choice, a right choice. Now, does that mean that there's not going to be difficulties in whatever choice we make? No, certainly there can be difficulties in anything. And we're not to expect a life without difficulty. That was very plain. We are going to count the cost. Following Christ is going to have a cost. It's going to have a significant cost. And so let's recognize the challenges here with that. Okay, let's turn the page. We've got 8 minutes for the back page. We're right on time. That sounds... Honestly, I don't think we're ever any quicker than that anyway. So, all right, Lot chose a direction based on material advantage that led down a path of spiritual compromise. That's the choice. That's the critical moment, was when he made this based on the material advantage, not recognizing the path that it was leading him down. So what's the consequences? We say this is a critical moment. What happened? What did this lead to for Lot to make this choice? First, Lot became gradually more entrenched in a wicked environment and system. Now follow this progression with me if you would. He first pitches his tent toward Sodom. He's looking. Then we get to chapter 14, and we have a conflict happen in Sodom, and Sodom loses badly to where the people and their possessions are carried away by these kings. And verse number 12 in chapter 14, and they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, notice this, who dwelt in Sodom. All right, chapter 13, he's just looking at Sodom. Chapter 14, where is he now? And when did it happen? Isn't that the point? It just happened. From the text standpoint, he was here, and now when we pick back with him, he's over there. And that's a lot like how progressional compromise looks like. You look and say, I just made a choice here. I don't even know how I got all the way to here. But it didn't stop there. Notice this now. God is going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and we get to then chapter 19, where Abraham, because of Abraham's righteousness and his faith, God is going to spare Lot and his family. So these angels of God go down to the city, and of course I think we understand Lot's still there even after the captivity goes back. And verse number 1, and there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot, now notice this, sat in the gate of Sodom. So what does that mean? Now he has some position of authority within the city of Sodom. First, I'm just looking. I've got to go somewhere. All right, I've got my tent pitched that direction. Now I'm there, and but I'm in this place. But just because it's closer to the grocery stores, I mean, I don't know what his reasoning was. It's better for my family, my kids. They can play with the other kids in the area. I'm being facetious, but I think you understand the point of that is to show how we think today and the decisions we make and the subtle things of it. And probably his thinking is, I'm in this city, but I'm not really a part of them. Now, he's the guy at the gate. That's a trusted position. Someone, if you're putting them at the gate, that's a position of safety that probably tied into what happened with Abraham. After that, they were like, man, your uncle's got some, he's got some strength. We're going to need you to be our gate. I don't know if it happened then or when it happened, but we see now he is entrenched. He is a part of Sodom. Not only that, but if we were looking further, he is hesitant to leave. Even though he knows the place is going to be destroyed by God. That's someone who's very rooted, isn't it? Right. Someone who now is entrenched in their environment that they have got to. So that's the consequence of it. The second, Lot placed his family in grave danger and lost his wife and some of his children. All right, so this one choice cost him his family, indisputably. Okay, so what happened to his wife? They go to leave, and of course they've been told, don't look back. Don't look back. And what does she do? They're on their way out. She looks back, and the Bible says she turned to a pillar of salt. She died. And just like that. Not only that, but I believe that the text shows us that Lot had unmarried children and Lot had married children. He had the unmarried daughters who were in his home, but then he had other daughters who were married because he went to them, to his son-in-laws, and he said, hey, we got to get out. God's going to destroy this place. And they thought he was joking. He looked at them as one who mocked. So I believe that he lost some of his children. I believe he lost grandchildren, potentially. I mean, we can only reasonably assume that'd be the case. That his family was destroyed by this one decision. And again, it started just by, yeah, we got to do something. Let's just go over this way. Innocent. On the surface, innocent. And yet that was a consequence. Notice number 3, Lot lost most, if not all, of the wealth that he had accumulated over the years. Now this one's a real ironic type of thing. He leaves from Abram, because of what? Space? Because they had so much what? Stuff. Sheep, cattle, whatever. They've got too much. They've got all these possessions. God is blessing them. Praise God for that. They're blessed. And he goes over here to this well-watered plain. Why did he pick that area? Well, the Bible calls it a well-watered plain, which implies that he picked it because it was most beneficial for all of his stuff, specifically all of his livestock, farming. That's why he picked it. So the very reason he went that way, and yet he lost all of that. I believe he lost all of that. Now, could he have taken some of his livestock with him? I guess you could try to find that in this story. I just don't think you can find it. Because the vision we get is he's lingering, and they're grabbing his hand like, we got to go. So that doesn't sound like someone's like, oh, okay, now let's open the cattle gate and let's have a big procession of... that's just not the vision we get in the text. So if you want to argue that position, certainly can, but it's not just that. Afterwards, he's living in a cave. That's not a picture of wealth in ancient history. It's just not. David lived in a cave when he's on the run. And I think we understand that he's up in the mountain in a cave, and just devastated. He's lost his family, he's lost his possessions, and I mean, it's just, he's got nothing left. Just he's got his two daughters. Praise God for that they were spared, but even they were going to see what takes place. And so the very reason why, in the long run, didn't even matter. His reasoning might have made sense in the moment, but as we look back, we can say that really was a wasted decision. Didn't make sense. And that's the whole hindsight, right? But with spiritual wisdom and vision, we don't have to just wait for hindsight to say, well, I wish I would have known that. Are we not to pray and seek to make decisions wisely, to know, Lord, reveal to me the things I need to know to make a good decision, so I can be guidance, direction, leadership where the Lord is guiding us. Now, are we going to know everything? Nobody knows everything except for God. But He is our God who will, if He wants us to go there, will He not give us the information we need to make the decision? I think He will. So we see this struggle here with that. And then Lot led his family. How are we looking? Oh, we're out of time. Lot led his family into spiritual depravity. All right, so it wasn't just that he lost his family, but he lost his family, right? Like, even his daughters who were spared get him drunk and sleep with him because they think that's their only choice. Maybe they think the whole world has been destroyed. I know, they're looking and say, we got no men, so this is what we're going to do. Maybe they thought because all his wealth was gone, that there was no hope for them to understanding that power dynamic in ancient times. I don't know what went into the reasoning beside what the text shows us, that they thought that there was no other choice. But even then, you see the depravity earlier. Him offering them up when the angels are there and the wicked men are at his door. And you see throughout all that. But then you see later on, the people, the lineage of Lot. You talk about the Moabites, the Ammonites. These are wicked, wicked people down the road. And so we see that this one decision brought now generationally a total separation from God. And his children had to know things about God, right? I mean, you think they saw the angels, they had to know something on the surface, but even his son-in-laws, they thought it was a big joke. So even one generation now, they're already, but then after that, these people, they set up child sacrifice later on. That's going to come through there. The Bible, the law forbid either one of these nations from being in a part of the children of Israel. It's very expressly stated in the law given to Moses. Don't let them in. I mean, I tell you, that's pretty shows you how far they went. All from that one choice. You would have never thought that. Lot, a righteous man. And what did 3 generations look like? What did 5 generations look like? All right, and then Lot vexed his righteous soul. I believe he was tormented. Vex is a very heavy word. Grief, it speaks to strong grief, sorrow, and troubling of one's soul. I believe he was very troubled. He was troubled when everything happened in with the angels. He was troubled by that. Like, whoa, men don't do this. But if that's how they were that day, do you think it was the first time that they were behaving like that? Absolutely not. The Bible literally gives the term sodomite to refer to even such a behavior. I think we even understand, and it's not limited to that one day. They were very, very wicked people. And imagine now being in that environment every day. And knowing right, knowing better, his soul was vexed. All right, a couple of questions for you.